Welcome and good afternoon, everyone. This is Brian Tate with the Innovative Payments Association. This is our second annual Summer of Learning program, and we're so very pleased to be joined by Judie Rinearson and Jeremy McLaughlin from K&L Gates. They're going to talk about NFTs, a flash in the pan or a true game changer. This is an interesting topic that a lot of people have read about and talked about and even been parodied on Saturday Night Live, but we're here to try to give you some facts and let you know what direction NFTs are going in. So if you have a question, please submit it through the chat during today's conversation. We'll tackle them at the end. If you have questions after today, you should feel free to email me at btate@ipa.org. But for now, I'm going to hand it off to Judie and Jeremy. Welcome.
Thank you. And it's great to be here. And this is particularly a topic that we are getting a lot of questions about, and there's a lot to cover here in our short hour. So let's, well, I guess I should introduce myself. I am Judie Rinearson. I'm a partner at K&L Gates's New York and London office, and I'm one of the global co-chairs of our blockchain group and our fintech group. And Jeremy, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Jeremy McLaughlin. I'm a partner in the San Francisco office, and I focus on payments, regulatory enforcement work, and our group does a lot of work kind of in the cryptocurrency and digital asset space as well.
Yeah. Jeremy's, I'd say, our lead lawyer on everything crypto. So feel free to tee up those questions. So let's go to the agenda. Next slide. So this is what we're going to try to run through. What are these things, NFTs? And then we're going to go through some of the legal issues that we are seeing more and more often. We do have a number of clients in the NFT space, and every question is very new and interesting, legal issue, because these are so new and cutting edge. We're going to look a little to the future, and we're going to talk about the I don't know if anyone saw the announcement that K&L Gates we did our own NFT, and I'll tell you a little bit about that at the end. So next slide, and Jeremy's going to take over.
Sure, thanks. Okay, so as Judie said, we're going to first talk about kind of what is an NFT. I'm going to cover some fairly basic concepts here, especially for those familiar with financial services, but I think starting with those concepts is helpful to understanding NFTs. So on this slide, we're talking about fungible versus non-fungible. And when we talk about something fungible, as the three pictures there show, you can have a $1 bill, 4 quarters, or $1 worth of Bitcoin, which I don't even know how many zeros you need in front of this at that point for it to be $1. But and although you may have a preference on which one you hold, they're all the same. They're going to hold the same value. It doesn't really matter which one you have. It's going to get you the same amount when you go down to the merchant at the corner. Whereas if we look at non-fungible and what that means, I kind of view non-fungibility in 2 ways. So if we look at the Mona Lisa painting and then the children's painting, so between those two, I do care whether I have the Mona Lisa or the child's drawing, right? Because the value of those is not interchangeable. But there's also a second aspect when I think about non-fungibility, and that's different versions of the same painting. So we have the Mona Lisa original and the Mona Lisa with the dog face on it. Even between those two, it's different versions of the same painting, but I still do care, because the value is different, right? And the value is because of uniqueness. So we can go to the next slide. And what uniqueness does is that's where the blockchain comes in. Blockchain adds provable uniqueness. So because the token, the NFT, is issued on a blockchain, blockchain is immutable, that provides us with a non-hackable kind of certificate of authenticity. So the NFT's value proposition is that it's a digitally unique token that exists on a blockchain like Ethereum. And while anyone can copy and download a video clip or image, an NFT has a record saying that this is the original and there's only one owner, and that owner is me because it's in my wallet. So the NFT is that digital version of certificate of ownership or authenticity. Some view these NFTs as kind of a solution to a problem the digital age has brought about. So, over the past decade or two, there was everything available online. I could Google anything and get access to art or videos or a music clip. And so it just proliferated, and it was harder to kind of make something more valuable. But blockchain allows organizations and artists to create scarcity again, to show that now we're going back to, well, while you can Google and look up a lot of these images, this is this one specific unique image that was issued that only has this. And so that kind of takes us back to whenever you could just have that one unique signed trading card. And so people were spending a lot of money on these things. NFT sales exceeded $2 billion in the first quarter of 2021. And it's being driven by artists and musicians and publishers monetizing their IP rights. Some of you have probably heard of these, but some of the ones that have grabbed the headlines are an NFT that was a collage sold for $69 million at Christie's auction house. The NBA has jumped into the game. They've created a marketplace of NFTs highlighting video clips. One featuring LeBron James sold for $200,000, and then I think one of the most recent ones I read about was an NFT of Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter. His first ever tweet, which was just setting up my Twitter, that NFT sold for $2.9 million. So people spend this money. So what do I have once I own it? Oftentimes there's not much you can do with it. But for some people, it's about bragging rights. It's a collector's item. It's like collecting that baseball card. They are transferable, and they may be sold. I can transfer it from my wallet to someone else's wallet or sell it to them. And so, for instance, that same artist that I mentioned earlier that sold a piece for $69 million at Christie's auction house, it previously actually sold an NFT for $67,000, and the purchaser of that resold it for $6.6 million. So that kind of leads us into what are the legal ramifications? What other rights are there? Do the original artists receive anything from the secondary sales? So on and so forth. So I'll turn it back to Judie to start us.
I was going to mention one thing, Jeremy. One of the things I understood what make the NFTs different is that they can't be split up. They're a single block on the chain, and unlike certain other tokens, apparently these are standalone. You can fractionalize ownership, but that's different from actually taking a block and turning it into smaller pieces.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. So let's go to the next slide. We're now delving into the fascinating legal issues. Jeremy got the fun stuff. So the first big question is securities laws. And in a way, it's hard to get your head wrapped around how does an NFT, this piece of art that's now digitally on the blockchain, how is it a security? And pretty much everyone agrees. I've been doing a lot of reading on this and research on this, that if you just sell a one-off NFT that only confers ownership over a specific piece of digital art or music, that by itself would not be considered an offering of securities. But the interesting thing in this area of financial services is that no one these days does just one thing. They want to create platforms. They want to fractionalize, as I mentioned earlier. So things like projects where large numbers of NFTs are minted and then are sold, and where the issuer then creates a secondary platform to sell them. So you're not just issuing them and telling somebody, well, if you want to, you can resell it. You are creating that platform yourself. That potentially creeps into the security side of the fence. And I added here gaming platforms because we're actually working on a NFT gaming platform project right now. And a lot of those platforms, very popular, they'll issue, instead of game cards, they do issue NFTs, but those NFTs can sometimes be sold on a secondary market. And so again, you have to take a close look and think about, what is the purpose of a particular NFT? How is it marketed? And you've got to be very careful not to make any suggestions like, oh, buy this NFT and it's a great investment. You'll make a lot of money and right away you're getting into the area of securities law that you want to avoid. Similar issues are those that entitle royalty payments or dividend streams. And again, I can't make a blanket statement that if this happens, you're a security, but you better look very closely and talk to a securities lawyer, make sure that you have, complied with any applicable laws, or made very clear that this is not a security for whatever the reasons. And even if you think it's not a security, you may want to check, because as we all know, the SEC has become increasingly active in this space. And anything that seems to be crypto related, they are scrutinizing very closely. One reason that it makes it a little tricky in the NFT space is that, unlike ICOs, we haven't seen a lot of interpretation by the SEC on how NFTs should be handled. Next slide. And that's the reason why Arconis Capital decided just a couple of months ago to ask the SEC whether or not they were, selling or issuing NFTs, whether they were in some kind of an investment contract. And it's an interesting, we have the link here. It's an interesting petition. It's not really long. It basically just says, hey, you've given guidance and other stuff. We think we need to understand where you sit on NFTs, and pretty much just as I said earlier, the position of the folks at Arconis were, hey, if you have a fractional NFT that gives people rights to acquire partial ownership, then that likely could be deemed a security. But we are expecting, if we ever get clear guidance from the SEC, that there is going to be more of a nuanced approach, and that they're going to choose to regulate some NFTs, depending on, again, how they're positioned, how they're marketed, how they're sold, what revenue streams come from them, and then others like the standalone art. I think we're all expecting that will not be a security. Next slide. Okay. Over to you, Jeremy.
Yep. So I'm going to talk about the intellectual property considerations for NFTs. And when we think about the IP rights, a lot of your approach is going to depend on whether you're, for example, the original artist who is the subject of the NFT, whether you're the creator of the NFT, or if you're a purchaser. And so here are some of the key, this slide shows some of the key things to think about. So for example, if you're a creator, you have to think about if you have all the rights you need to create that NFT. You can't just go take the picture, mint it as an NFT. Do you have the right to reproduce and distribute that NFT? And as you're thinking about that, you'll also want to make sure you talk with your intellectual property counsel to make sure that you're considering protections for yourself as a creator, so that whenever that NFT continues onward and is perhaps traded, what rights follow along with that. Trademark protection is another similar thing to think about, especially as a creator. So it's easy enough to create an NFT of something, but if that image has trademark or copyright protections around it, we can expect, and we've seen some of this, that the actual brand owners that have that trademark are going to enforce their rights. And so the minting, the minting of an NFT is not likely to be in the scope of any existing trademark license that has been granted to you. So making sure you have the proper license or grant of authority to use that trademarked image is another thing to keep in mind. Royalties is a really interesting topic in this space, and I know Judie touched on it a bit, but it's kind of been up for debate whether there are royalty payments to the original artist for an NFT for an initial sale, or especially if then there are additional sales afterwards. And generally, at the beginning, that had not been the case because of kind of existing token standards. There wasn't really a way to do that, but that we're starting to see that change. And some of the major NFT marketplaces are starting to implement kind of what we call kind of royalty downstreaming, so that the original creator receives that royalty payment each time that the work resells.
I've spoken to artists who, I think this is one of the things that they like about NFTs. Generally in the art world, you get something like 50% of the sale when a gallery sells your art, and you get nothing if it gets resold. And we are now seeing more and more NFTs, including a royalty payment, so that you do get a little piece of the action, so to speak, every time the artwork is sold, which I think it's good for artists.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. And so those are kind of if you're a creator. So if you're a purchaser of these, you want to make sure you know what you're getting with that NFT, and keep in mind a key distinction is that there's a difference between ownership of that NFT, of that token, and ownership of any excuse me, any underlying IP rights. Is the NFT simply marketed as being connected with something in the real world? Or is there any actual license or ownership rights that attach to that NFT? Any transfer of any IP rights will usually be, happen through a license or some agreement, not just the mere purchase. But that's something that you want to make sure you as a purchaser understand, and it's also incumbent on the seller to make that clear. Typically, any IP rights as a purchaser, typically any IP rights you get are going to be quite limited. It's just going to be the right to own. So you may own a particular video clip or photo of LeBron James in NFT form, but the underlying rights still belong to the NBA, right? Not you. So as a result, the NFT owner, you may not be permitted to reproduce or distribute copies of that. Instead, that copyright owner retains those exclusive rights to capitalize on that.
Yeah. One of the other interesting things that we're seeing with IP rights is that, I don't know if you remember the old days when you had pirates, internet pirates taking domain names. You're now seeing NFT pirates taking, and we've had clients who have done searches on some of the big open NFT sites, and suddenly their trade name is on an NFT that they had nothing to do with. So the good thing is, at least everything I'm hearing, is that the marketplace is out there selling NFTs. When they get a complaint about that, they will pull those NFTs, but someone may have already purchased it. So again, as Jeremy said, you really you got to know what you're buying and who really owns that IP. It's very important.
Yeah, and we're also seeing more. There's a website that I was looking at the other day that keeps a running track of filings at the USPTO office that are related to NFTs. So people filing trademarks specifically to go into an NFT, right? And so in that case, maybe that trademark, right, will travel with the NFT. So I think we're just seeing the beginning of different types here. Okay, next slide. Back to you, Judy.
So AML laws, and this is an interesting space because there has been some movement and guidance from the FinCEN and the AML authorities. The two big questions that people are asking these days on the AML side is, first, are NFTs going to be regulated the same way as fungible cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin? And you all may recall that FinCEN was one of the first regulators out there to issue guidance about cryptocurrencies. They just updated their AML Act as of January 2021. And there is no mention of NFTs, but they do expand the definition of financial institutions to include businesses involved in the exchange of value that substitutes for currency or funds. Now, that clearly would cover cryptocurrency exchanges, but then the question is, well, are NFTs value that substitute for currency? We would say probably not. I think there are some really good arguments that NFTs should not be treated the same as cryptocurrencies when it comes to AML laws, at least. And I think there is at least in terms of cryptocurrency exchanges. But what's really interesting is this new focus by FinCEN and art and antiquity dealers. As many of you know, trade in art and antiquities is estimated to be the third largest type of black market after drugs and arms. And just a couple of months ago, FinCEN issued guidance requiring financial institutions to report suspicious activity relating to art sales. And they've also issued guidance on antiquity and now antiquity dealers. And now FinCEN is undertaking a study about extending BSA requirements to art dealers. And I think so the question is, well, if they extend to art dealers, does it extend to NFTs that may be sold on a gallery, digital art gallery website? And my guess is that, yeah, I think they are going to see the similarities between a multi-million-dollar piece of actual art hanging on a wall versus an NFT, and they're going to view them similarly. That's where I'm betting, at least, but we still have a lot to wait and see. But that's my guess on where anti-money laundering laws are going to come out with NFTs. But again, we'll have to wait and see what happens. Next slide. The other part of regulatory issues comes with the concept of money transmitter licensing. Now, I suppose you all know that cryptocurrencies have already come under scrutiny by a lot of states requiring any medium of exchange to get licensed, someone who issues it, someone who sells it, someone who exchanges. Here are examples of two laws. Most of the laws look to regulate products or services that really are more of a medium of exchange. And I gave you two examples here of the Alabama law and then the New York bit license law. Now, New York's law is a little broader. You can see it doesn't regulate just medium of exchange, but also digitally stored value. One could argue that is an NFT could be digitally stored value, but then the bit license goes on and says virtual currency shall be broadly construed to include digital units of exchange. And again, I do not put NFTs in that category of a digital unit of exchange, unless it's like we were talking earlier, like a big game platform where they have multiple NFTs all offered at the same time. I still think it would be hard to stretch those laws to cover these. I know that Jeremy, he tracks on a 50-state basis cryptocurrency laws, and there are states that have looked much more closely at licensing things like stable coins that are linked to real currency. That means in a state regulator's mind, that often means, well, if you've got a crypto that is now, it's not just nothing behind it, this is now linked with a fiat currency, well, that definitely should be regulated if you're holding on to someone else's stable coins. But again, the states are all over the place, and we haven't seen anything like that with NFTs, at least not now. So the other question about digital wallets that hold NFTs, if you may recall that states regulate you if you are exchanging or receiving for purposes of transmittal, but also if you're holding value that belongs to someone else. And I think this is still an open issue. These are really early days for NFTs. Holding value belonging to someone else could come under scrutiny. especially if it's easily convertible. On the other hand, if it is a one-off, if it's a piece of art or a collectible, there's a lot less. Certainly, people holding other art, digital art or collectibles, you don't see that being requiring a money transfer. So again, we're going to have to watch this one closely. Next slide.
Yeah, and speaking of watching closely, I mean, I think this slide shows some enforcement and private litigation about NFTs, and this shows that we're really in the early days of figuring out how these are going to be regulated. So there are two things here. One, Judie mentioned earlier. So Arconis Capital, who is a registered broker-dealer with the SEC, petitioned the SEC in April for a rulemaking, kind of looking for guidance. And the primary point of the petition is that clarity is needed so that companies know if their activities, with any particular NFT could trigger obligations, such as to register as a broker-dealer or an exchange or an alternative trading system, because these NFTs can take many different forms. And so if we're going to categorize some that would trigger certain securities issues or registration requirements and others not, Arconis is saying we need to have some guidance around that so that people aren't just accidentally stepping into this space. So Arconis has requested that the SEC publish a concept release on the regulation of NFTs and to propose rules to address when an NFT is a security. There's at least one private litigation involving NFTs, and it is a class action that was filed in New York State versus Dapper Labs. So Dapper Labs created NBA Top Shot, which is, what I referenced earlier, a digital marketplace for NFTs with highlight videos from NBA games. And according to that complaint, the complaint argues that Top Shot NFTs are securities because they satisfy the Supreme Court's four-pronged Howey test. So a few of the kind of highlights from that complaint, at least, is that the complaint argues that buyers of the NFTs are dependent on Dapper Labs to maintain as it says, quote, crazed level of hype that surrounds NFTs. It argues that Dapper Labs can determine if and when investors can cash out of their top shots and get the value of the current value for that NFT, and that the insiders hold significant gains on paper that have been restricted from actually taking those profits. It's really unclear where this suit is going to go. As of yesterday, at least, Dapper Labs hadn't answered the complaint or responded to the complaint. I think there are some big questions about whether the case will really result in any clarity for us. For example, in Top Shot's fine print, there are provisions that make it seem like maybe this case isn't going to get us the guidance we need. The terms say that there's no right to a jury trial, there's no right to class action lawsuits, and this is a class action lawsuit. And last but not least, it says that all disputes have to be dealt with in binding arbitration, which this obviously is not. So it'll be an interesting case to follow. Whether or not it gets us the guidance we need, though, is a separate question. Next slide, please. I think it's back to you, Judie.
So anytime that you're dealing with products or services that can be very expensive and are sold to the public, you also have to think about consumer protection rules. And if you don't, then you're very likely to get hit with something like a class action. There are lots of examples of what kinds of disclosures are out there in the marketplace. I've included some here that I have seen on other websites and based a lot on what people recommend for cryptocurrency sales as well. And it's really important. We're going to get into this in terms of instructing sellers of NFTs. It's really important to make sure your customers know what it is that they are purchasing and understand that, hey, this is a volatile market. We may not have any, whatever you purchase, you got to purchase because you like it, not because you think you're going to make a quick buck. So here are some of the disclosures we recommend. Uh, there may not be a market with a sufficient number of potential buyers and sellers, and therefore you may not have a liquid product and you may not be able to resell your NFT. The value of the NFT is volatile. You might lose money. Your digital wallet may not function properly and may be subject to hacking, malicious software, et cetera, et cetera. These events may cause delays or failures in your ability to purchase, hold, manage, or sell your NFTs. Laws may apply in certain jurisdictions that could be enacted or could be changed. And of course, as we've already talked about, this is a fairly unregulated part of financial services at this point, and we are expecting to see more regulation, and that could change the value of your NFT or how easy it will be to buy or sell it. And then finally, that the platform, whether this is a wax platform or another one, any changes to whoever is marketing or selling or holding your NFT, that too can impact or impede your ability to purchase, hold, and use, sale, or alienate your NFTs. So you got to keep those in mind. And these are just a few samples. There are others that you may want to consider adding as well. So next slide. So Jeremy, did you want to walk through these advice to purchasers?
Sure.
Okay.
So some of these are kind of topics that I covered whenever we talked about IP, but because really the rights and things you have to consider about whenever you're dealing with NFTs, if you're on the purchaser side or you're the creator or the artist side. So again, a reminder that you're purchasing, when you purchase an NFT, you're purchasing that token, that code on the blockchain that is linked to the NFT, the art or image. You're not, this art on the wall, you're not getting that piece. I didn't even think of sitting here for that reason, but that worked out well. So that I have no ownership rights to that. What I have is an NFT in my wallet that is an image of that or linked to that or the video. And kind of part and parcel of that is you'll need your digital asset or a digital wallet to hold that asset. NFTs, like anything else, are you want to kind of put money in the place you want to support. So NFTs, I think there are now big artists that are getting involved, both musicians and like the NBA, but it's also a very good avenue for new or younger artists or artists that don't have as big of a reach. So, purchase NFTs from an artist that you want to support. And because just your purchase alone is one, right? But then if we're reselling and there are royalty rights attached, that benefits that artist a lot more. As Judie mentioned, and then the last slide with the disclosures, don't expect that the NFT will go up in value. It's obviously a good thing for you and the artist if it does, but there's not going to be a guarantee. So kind of relating back to the first point about what you own is this NFT, this digital code on the blockchain. And that is linked to this piece of art behind me. There can be other versions of that or other copies that are also linked to this or a variation of this. But each of those, you don't have an exclusive right to exclude those, right? All you have is that one NFT that you purchased. It may be affiliated with something that another NFT is also affiliated with, but that one token is what you own, and that's provable that only you own it. And then the last thing, which actually will kind of go into a point I'm going to make later about a future use case for NFTs, is that understand the token that you have, and wherever that links to something, where is that art actually stored? So the NFT will usually point to like the traditional internet site where the work is actually housed. Next slide.
And now we're going to turn to advice for artists and musicians who are thinking of issuing NFTs of their own content. And I think I have family members. I have a son who's a musician. I have a son who does art. And I think it's in a way, it's a great idea as a way to monetize something that you otherwise couldn't monetize. But there's things that you would have to think about as well. Of course, something that Jeremy mentioned, make sure that your art or image is unique and authenticated. Ensure that you have the rights necessary to reproduce and redistribute. Work with reputable tech companies. There are some out there, there are a lot of companies blogging their services, but there are some out there that charge a lot. It depends a lot on like what chain they're on. Some that use more energy or powered, and so you think about very carefully what company that you are going to work with, and then the same way, find out what the company's view is on royalties. Study NFT framework that you are using for your piece of art or music. Does it allow for automatic royalties or not? And you need to find that out right out front. Spend some time thinking about who your marketplace is and look at how they advertise. What you want to make sure is you're working with a reputable marketplace that doesn't overpromise or overhype. And also avoid those that require a huge upfront payment, because a lot of struggling artists and musicians don't have the funding to do that kind of thing. And again, the disclosures at the time of sale need to be clear. I'd ask to see them. What does the purchaser's contract look like? It should have a lot of those disclaimers that I've already mentioned earlier. It should be you don't want your customers, if you're an artist or a musician, to be disappointed or unhappy with the purchase. Next slide.
And so here are a few future use cases. Well, some are already existing, but big avenues where we think the use cases of NFTs will expand. The first one we've talked about a lot already, so royalties and benefits for artists and musicians. I think one thing I touched on earlier with this is, the NFTs affect a wide range of artists, and it can affect them in different ways. So smaller artists, they'll be able to use NFTs to get access to a wider audience that they may not otherwise have. Whether this is a painter or a musician, this suddenly provides them a wide swath of listeners that they may not have otherwise had. On the flip side, if you're a larger artist, you probably already have access to a lot of potential consumers, but this is a new channel through which you can spread your content and receive further royalty payments as we see more and more that the kind of downward stream royalty is being built into the NFT. A replacement for special event tickets. So the thought here is that instead, you can, if I'm attending a conference or a concert, we'll replace a traditional ticket with a tokenized NFT ticket. And that can be shared through an email or an SMS, and that will give me the ticket to attend this event. And what it enables a lot for the producer. So the producer or the artist putting on the event has the ability to monitor performance and ticket redemption, because each of those NFTs are unique and sent to one person and followed on the blockchain. I also can instantly update any information that's on that ticket through just the click of a button, because it's digital and can automatically update. And then I also have control over the redemption, and for instance, if there's an expiration information on that ticket as an NFT, as a digital ticket, I can automatically update that and have control over that. The supply chain.
One other thought on the ticket piece. I don't know whether folks saw any of the consensus conference, which was last week, but one of the speakers, Gary Vaynerchuk, the media guy, he was saying, and just think how great, event tickets would be as collectibles, that it would be, you automatically have something proven that you were there, and it can't be duplicated, and maybe that would also make it sellable later on in the NFT marketplace.
Yep. An area that I find quite fascinating for NFTs is the supply chain product authentication. And some companies have started on this, but I think we're going to see a lot more. And the thought here is that because NFT is this, provable uniqueness, you use it to authenticate goods, so to ensure the quality of them and the origin. And it's especially, we've seen it for use in high quality goods here. So Louis Vuitton actually has started to use NFTs for this purpose. So they use an NFT to identify and trace the entire supply chain of the goods that are going into a high-end product. So it's kind of like reminiscent of like issues you think about like when blood diamonds, and you want to know exactly where things are coming from. Well, because an NFT is immutable, once you link it on these supply chain avenues, then you know where the goods are, and you can trace them and ensure that it's the quality and it is the origin that Louis Vuitton is representing, or that 4 people down the supply chain is representing where it's actually coming from. And it's useful for something such as a high quality good from Louis Vuitton, but also, if you think about a car that requires 3,000 parts to be made and manufactured, using an NFT to track where all of those parts come from, wherever there's so many moving parts, the NFT makes it much easier to kind of follow and ensure where in the supply chain that it came from. And then the last one here, to be honest, I've read about it. Maybe Judie, I've not seen a ton of development on it, but it's an interesting concept, which is kind of the replacement for personal records. And I think the value of this is self-evident, right? So if you use an NFT to replace vital personal documents, such as a driver's license or passport, the value there is, right, it proves that it's unique. It's not a counterfeit document. It's not a fake ID. It's not a made up passport. This is actually my passport. And it also kind of moves these documents into the digital age. We all walk around with our smartphones, but we still have to have this paper passport that we carry around that's easily able to be lost. So I think this is, like I said, I've not seen development in this area yet, but I've seen a lot of people talk about it. I think it's a promising area for the future.
Yeah, that's all I've really seen is more talk about this and the blockchain.
Yeah.
But it's the nice thing, because NFTs can't be broken into pieces and things, and they can be stored in your wallet. It is sort of a natural, I think, a use case that would make sense.
Yeah.
Good. So
okay, next slide.
Next slide. Okay, and this is our little postscript here. We had fun doing this just a month ago or so. The K&L Gates, we put together a team with our securities, our IP, our litigation, our Jeremy and me in the payment side, to put together sort of what we called the Thinking Lawyer's Guide to Non-Fungible Tokens. And in preparing this, we were talking to one of our clients, NFT Cred, and to get some guidance from them, again, on things that you should think about and how it works. And they're the ones who actually suggested, hey, K&L Gates, you should make your article into an NFT. And so we sort of looked at it, and we talked internally, and we said, yeah, why the heck not? We may as well. It will be fun, and it will help us sort of learn what the process is. And we had to make some decisions in terms of, what chain would it go on. We wanted to be environmentally conscious and not be on an NFT that uses a huge amount of energy. We wanted to find a platform that we were comfortable using, And we ended up actually issuing, we did a little press release about it. We're not the only law firm, there's a second law firm, can't remember who, that also had done an NFT of the article. I don't think they did a client alert the way we did. And if you can go to the next slide, you'll see when you open up the NFT and it's held in a K&L Gates wallet, that's the digital art that was created to link the article. Then there is a link to the article. It's in, we have our own K&L Gates digital wallet to hold our NFT. And so far, we only have one NFT, but hey, maybe we can take the recording of this IPA and turn it into another NFT. I'll have to talk to Brian and Ben about that. But it's a good exercise in understanding how the process works, how the product works. And I guess the number one question I get about this is, well, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to sell it? Are you going to auction it? What we're looking at doing is, in fact, auctioning it just within our law firm to our lawyers, with the proceeds going to a not-for-profit, a charity, probably a legal charity like Legal Aid or something like that. So, but I have to admit that I'm very grateful that my partners all thought this wild and crazy idea would be one that would work for the firm and that they supported it. So when and if we get around to auctioning it, I'll provide an update, but it's been a good exercise to do and one that I recommend to others. So that's it for us. I think we're on our question time now. And I see Brian has popped up. Hi, Brian.
Judie, Jeremy, thank you so very much. There is a lot to digest here as we're all still learning this process. I do want to pause and allow everyone who would like to submit a question through the Q&A or chat to do so. This is an opportunity to talk to two people who are kind of on the cutting edge of a new sector. While everyone is thinking about their questions, I have a few from today's conversation. One, and you touched on it a little bit, but I can't resist here. One is the value of the crypto market has gone up, and up over the last 5 to 10 years, and especially over the last 3 years. Is there a world where you might imagine that an NFT might continue to rise? And if so, is there a ceiling? We've seen bubbles in 2008 on various industries, and we've seen crypto kind of get it a little impacted by Elon Musk's decision. Could a similar thing happen in the NFT market?
Well, I have to admit that people do, this is where the flash in the pan question is, compare it to like Beanie Babies or something. There are crazes that happen in the past, and it does seem to me every NFT is different and connected to some, work of art or music or video. And it seems to me as long as the underlying piece of art or music is still, revered and valued, then it should maintain its value. I think the thing is you hear these stories, like as soon as that big Beeple sale of his huge collage went for 69 million, people were going on websites and just purchasing 20, 30, 40 NFTs just because they wanted to have them in their portfolio. And, that's why we say, you gotta like the art, you don't just buy it to have them in your digital wallet. So,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna ask Jeremy if he wanted to add something.
Yeah, I would just add, the crypto market, to me, it still somewhat struggles from this, is a lot of it is consumer buy-in and understanding. And I think it has risen more and more as that has happened, and it's become more mainstream. And I think that's the same thing with NFTs. I think a lot of people still don't truly understand it or what they are. and let alone how they can function. So I think as more and more people understand it, and we see more and more of the use cases, even outside of art, when we see it in supply chain, I think it's here to stay for a while.
We did receive a question through the Q&A. It is our first question, and here we go. Since we are still not sure about NFTs classification, is it possible to buy an NFT from countries that are sanctioned by the US government, i.e. the NFT is created in a sanctioned country?
Those OFAC restrictions on sanctions, they are very clear. It's any transaction. I mean, it's for anything. So I don't think the fact that it's an NFT makes it any easier to do business. You're still having a transaction. It's still a purchase and sale. So this is the first time anyone's asked this question, but my immediate thought is, now, even an NFT, I wouldn't want to buy in a sanctioned country if you're a US citizen, a US resident.
Yeah.
Ben, any thoughts? You look like you've got your thinking cap on.
Well, I mean, I have a ton of questions, obviously, but we're kind of short on time. I guess one of the things that you guys brought up that I'm very curious about is the notion of copyright and what the original owner owns and whether or not they own the rights. Are NFTs, or could NFTs become a way to essentially establish copyright, to say, I have the NFT, I own the rights to this? Or is it something that comes post copyright? You mentioned like other trademarks being pulled into an NFT and that creating some complications for creators. Where does this go, I guess, is my thought. Do you see any trends or signs?
So, well, copyright, in my view, and I'm not an IP lawyer, but I've done enough to be dangerous. They're separate rights. I think what it means is that when you acquire your NFT, you really need to you got to see in black and white in that purchase agreement whether what intellectual property rights you're acquiring, in addition to the code that's on the blockchain. But I haven't seen anything else new written about that. I know, Jeremy, you looked at IP issues.
Yeah. I think when it comes to copyright, I mean, it's gonna, you need to, the NFT would have to be accompanied with some sort of license grant or assignment, and that I've not really seen that yet. I mean, could that be done? Is that a part of a purchase contract for an NFT? I think perhaps, right, and then maybe you can. I'm sure you're going to limit the grant quite a bit, but that could increase the value. I think where we will see more development is kind of this whole notion of trademark rights and an NFT. And I think we see that by the filings of the USPTO. I think people are already thinking about an NFT actually with its own trademark, and those rights go with the NFT. So I think that's where there's more, I think, activity as of now. But like Judie, I'm not an IP lawyer, so just those are my thoughts off the cuff.
Well, so then, given everything that you've seen, do you think that companies ought to think, I mean, obviously you guys have done it, but do you think that companies ought to be thinking about creating NFTs for some of their intellectual property, even as just kind of a preventative measure to prevent squatters or pirates or whatever?
And actually, I think it's a good idea to think about. I mean, the people that we've been approached to so far who are looking at NFTs as solutions are people that are holding content that could be very valuable. Photographs of artifacts, newspaper articles of front pages, things like that. There are lots of content providers out there just trying to figure out, content holders, it could be, trying to figure out how to possibly monetize it or protect it. And there is something very attractive about using this NFT. They're relatively inexpensive to create. You'll have a full record, and it will, and it makes it easy to sell them on a secondary marketplace. So it is, I think, again, depending on what kind of company it is and what data or images they're holding, I think it would be worth considering. Certainly something that should be thought about relatively carefully, because I think it's going to happen.
We do have time for one last question. I just want to open it up, see if anyone in the Q&A would like to submit a question. If you think of a question after today's presentation, you can email me and I'll be happy to pass it on to Judie and Jeremy. My email is btate@ipa.org. Ben, any closing thoughts?
No, thank you both for presenting on this. I mean, I think it's fascinating, and it's a lot to kind of wrap our heads around. And
yeah.
It feels like a whole new world out there. So I appreciate the understanding and a little bit more around what's going on. And I do think it was better than the Saturday Night Live presentation.
Yay!
On that note, I want to thank Judie and Jeremy and K10 Gates for being with us today. We look forward to continuing this conversation and seeing how the market evolves. We have another presentation next week on white labeling, and we look forward to everyone staying healthy and having a great, enjoyable summer. Thank you, everyone.